give it a minute here while everyone gets signed in and gets your settings all set. Um, while people are logging in and joining, we always like to kick it off with a little bit of a fun little icebreaker question. You can feel free to answer in the chat. So today's question is, if you could have one superpower today, what would it be? I'll go ahead and kick it off since I have the microphone. I would definitely want to be able to fly. I just think that would be like so fun. No more trying to get my steps in. I'm just flying places. How about
Love
Carla
it.
said sleep? I
Love
love
it.
that. How about you, Lissa?
Yeah, I'm right there with Carla. I will say that I've been getting over the flu, which I hope none of you get it or have gotten it recently because it is bad. So, whether that's like sleeping or pausing time so that I could just sleep and fully recover, that would be mine. Brianna, how about you?
Yeah, I think Samantha took mine too. I want to be able to fly, so then I could just be like, "I'll see you in a flash," and just be like, "Shoo, I'm there."
Brianna,
I think it
there's
would be
a
really great.
Billy's got us beat though. She in the chat just said teleportation.
Ooh.
Ooh.
I mean, oh, go see your mom instantly. I don't know. I could talk about this the whole next hour, so I'm going to move on before I get fired from webinars. Okay, so as you might know, this webinar is brought to you by Evaluate, the evaluation hub for the Advanced Technological Education Program. Our vision is an ATE community in which evaluation is valued, systematic, and used to improve the education of technicians in high tech fields. We do this through engaging the ATE community with information, expertise, and tools to advance high quality evaluation. The slides from this webinar are already available on Evaluate's website, along with several other resources. You may also download these resources by following the link on the right side of your screen. The recording will be available within a couple of days, and that will be emailed directly to you. I'm Samantha Hooker. I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. Lissa Wilson Betcho and Brianna Hook Singletary will be our presenters today. Lissa is the principal investigator of Evaluate, and Brianna is a senior research associate for Evaluate. All three of us are located at the Evaluation Center at Western Michigan University. We always like to recognize the people that help us put these together behind the scenes. From our team, we have Maureen Green, who's in the chat helping with any tech needs you might have, and Lori Wingate, Carolyn Williams-Noren, our handy copy editor, and from Mentor Connect, Elaine Kraft, Pam Silvers, and Emery DeWitt. Before we get started, I do like to point out that the views expressed in this webinar are those of the presenters, and they don't necessarily reflect the views of the National Science Foundation. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lissa.
Thanks, Samantha. And thank you, Mentor Connect, for having us here and for everyone who is in attendance today. I'm here with Brianna, and we are really excited to talk about evaluation today. I'm going to go ahead and actually hide our cameras just so we can focus on the slides for a bit, but we'll go ahead and turn the cameras back on during our question and answer breaks. So we have a lot to talk about in the next hour. But we wanted to begin today by just checking in with you because often we find that people bring some assumptions, some feelings, frankly, sometimes even some baggage with them into conversations about evaluation. And that is completely fair. We just want to know what you're bringing with you to today's webinar. So, using the chat box to the right side of your screen, share one word that comes to mind when you hear the term evaluation. So this is a no judgments zone. Please don't hold back. A good, bad. We want to hear it. I see them cutting in. So Eileen says feedback. Tim, assessment. Julia says outcomes. Another assessment and outcomes. Connie says data. William says graded. Nice. April says nervous. That's okay. Happy says measurement. Ted says lots of detail about stuff. I love it. Christine, help us stay on track with the project. Yes, Fairs help, share in continuous improvement. Kirk, similarly, info for improvement. Yusuf, what's wrong with, right? Tedious, Kelly, I get it. I get it. Yeah. And some assessments in there too. Yeah. Well, thank you all for those words and for your honesty. These are all completely fair and acceptable associations. But we'll tell you right now that we have one primary goal for today, and that's to have you all walk away with a more hopeful and positive look on what program evaluation can do for you and why you want to partner with your evaluation team for the sake of your students, your faculty, and for your project. So many of you today might be like my friend Jen. So meet Jen Generickson. And she has a great idea for an ATE proposal. She is working with her colleagues to pull together specifics about her project activities and her work plan. And in reading through the AT solicitation, she comes to this section on evaluation. It states that all ATE funded work must be evaluated. She's never had an NSF grant before, and she's not entirely sure what this means. In fact, she has quite a lot of questions, like what even is evaluation and why should she do it? How much is this going to cost her project? Of course. Who can serve as that evaluator, and where does she find them? So, in today's webinar, we are going to answer all of these questions and any other questions that come up for you along the way. So, we do have a few planned question and answer breaks throughout today's webinar. Please, anytime you have a question or a clarification, go ahead and throw it in the chat window. Both Samantha and Maureen are going to be keeping an eye on that window to tag questions as we go along. So I do want to give a quick caveat that today is a part one of a two-part series of evaluation webinars that we're going to give for Mentor Connect. So today is really just meant to be an introduction, kind of like a quick start guide to what you need to know about evaluation as a prospective grantee, a grants professional, or even an administrator. On March 19th, in part number two, we're going to dive into more of the details and specifics about how to precisely write an evaluation plan for your AT proposal. So, in both webinars, we want to connect you back to the wealth of resources on the Evaluate website so that when you inevitably have a question about evaluation later, you know where to find your answers. All right, so I'm going to invite Brianna to step up and tell us more about what evaluation is.
Thank you, Lissa. So let's start with the most fundamental question. What is evaluation? At its core, evaluation is a process of learning, of seeking understanding, of making informed decisions, and of ensuring that efforts are truly making a difference. When we evaluate programs, we're asking important questions like, did this project achieve its goals? Why or why not? Who benefited, and just as importantly, who didn't? What were the impacts, and what should change moving forward? The learning from an evaluation should be driven by you, the project staff, and those served by the project. This might be students or faculty, business, and even industry partners. It can be really helpful to ask these groups what they want to know about their project, what questions matter to them, what insights would be most useful for them. We'll come to this, but at the end of the day, the best evaluations are a partnership between the project team and the evaluation team. Your evaluators are your partners in learning. They're not here to catch you doing something wrong or to break you down. They're not auditors, and this isn't a performance review. Improvement data isn't a reflection of the worth of staff or a project. It's just information that can be used to identify opportunities for growth. Evaluators are there to work with you, to make your project better for the sake of your project and ultimately your students. There's no such thing as a failed project. Just like in any scientific experiment, there's no bad data, only opportunities to learn. Every piece of information, even when things don't go as planned, is a chance to reflect, adjust, and improve. When a project falls short of its goals, it's not failure, it's insight. Understanding what doesn't work gets you closer to what does. All right, so what does this actually look like in practice? Boiled down, evaluation involves 4 main steps. First, asking important questions about a project's processes and outcomes. This is about making sure the evaluation focuses on the things that really matter. This is where your project's learning desires come in. These questions scope the rest of the evaluation. The next step is gathering evidence that will help answer those questions. Evidence for evaluation is often gathered using research methods like focus groups, interviews, surveys, or observations. In ATE programs, evaluations also often use a college's institutional data, may use results from course evaluations, and sometimes includes feedback from panels of experts or advisors. Then we have to make sense of the data. So we interpret the results and answer the evaluation questions. When it comes to interpreting or making meaning of the data that was collected, evaluations almost always look for project strengths and weaknesses. When measuring outcomes, it's important to understand their impact and what they mean for those involved. This is often done by comparing to some sort of benchmark or standard. And then the last step is to use that information gathered for project improvement, accountability, and planning. The use of evaluation findings for decision-making is a key part of the evaluation cycle. But this isn't really the final step because evaluation should help shape decisions for the next project. And then this cycle of learning starts all over again. So this brings us to our first poll question. When should you start thinking about evaluation in your grant process? Take a moment to read the answer choices carefully, then select the best option that reflects your perspective. I'll be quiet for about a minute to give you some time to respond. Let's see. All right. Okay, so I hope you had enough time to review the options. Let's get started at the bottom. So option C suggests thinking about evaluation near the end of the project, primarily for reporting and future planning. Though we may get some useful insights, we don't want to do this because it means missing opportunities to gather meaningful data along the way. Waiting until the end leaves us relying on memory, incomplete records, and whatever data happens to be available, which may not fully capture the project's impact or guide improvements in real time. Now let's look at option B, starting evaluation at project kickoff, right when funding is secured and activities begin. This might seem like a logical place to start. The project is fresh, everyone is engaged, and there's excitement about getting things underway. But while it's great to think about evaluation early, waiting until kickoff to plan it can be a missed opportunity. By this point, key project decisions have already been made, and there may be limited flexibility to align evaluation with project goals in a meaningful way. Our last option, option A, suggests starting evaluation during the proposal development phase to ensure that evaluation activities are built into the program from the beginning. This is ideal because it allows for a clear plan that aligns with project goals, ensures necessary data can be collected from the start, and meets funder expectations. By integrating evaluation at this stage, we can identify key metrics, set realistic benchmarks, and allocate resources appropriately. It also helps build a culture of evaluation from the outset, making it a natural part of the project rather than an afterthought. Ultimately, this approach can lead to more meaningful insights and better decision-making and stronger overall impact. All right, so now Jen has a better sense of what it means to have her project evaluated, but she's still unsure of why she should do it. So why should she evaluate her project? Why should she want to evaluate her project? And as I said before, evaluation is all about learning. We typically talk about three main benefits that come from evaluations. First, learning about what works and what doesn't work in order to improve your project. Second, sharing those learnings back with the NSF. As your funder, NSF also wants to learn about what changes have happened because of their investment in your project. And third, providing evidence of the effectiveness of your project, both for your project and for others who are trying to do similar things. Evidence of what works can add to the larger field of technician training. A saying we often hear is that the most important purpose of evaluation is not to prove, but to improve. While research is usually done to build knowledge, evaluation is meant to support decision-making. The first purpose of evaluation is for improvement and decision-making. Utility, or the usefulness of an evaluation, is actually a standard of quality which evaluations are judged. Evaluation findings are intended to be used. Let's look at some examples of how evaluation might be used by projects. In our first example, evaluation findings might highlight a particularly effective recruitment strategy for women in a cybersecurity program. The project decides to lean into this success and shift additional resource to that recruitment strategy. In a second example, the project evaluator might share that faculty in their professional development workshop had a particularly difficult time understanding a unit on semiconductors. This is a red flag that indicates they might want to revisit that unit or provide additional instruction. Evaluation can uncover these patterns and give you an understanding of what you might change and why. The second purpose of an evaluation is for accountability. As the future funder of your project, NSF does require an independent evaluation. In order to be in compliance with that requirement of your ATE grant, you must evaluate your project. Just like you want to learn about the effectiveness of your project, so does the NSF. At a basic level, evaluation enables a high degree of accountability. Individual grantees are held accountable for their use of federal resources, and that information helps NSF be accountable to Congress and justify continued support of the program. Projects funded by NSF have to submit reports annually through an online system called research.gov. The main report sections are shown here. In the accomplishments section, grantees report on project goals, activities, results, and outcomes. The evaluation will provide much of the evidence for these. Your program officer will expect you to upload your evaluation report here, and they will also want you to share what you learned and how you use the findings. If you made changes, your evaluation findings can help explain why. If the project faced challenges or found opportunities to shift its focus to improve outcomes, you can include evidence of those changes in the section for changes or problems. You know, it's helpful to know what NSF will expect in your reporting, even when you're at the proposal stage. Understanding what you'll be asked to provide now will help you prepare in advance. The third purpose of evaluation is for evidence. We hear a lot about evidence-based practices or high-impact practices. We trust that systematic research and evaluation of these efforts have provided evidence that they work. Just as you borrow from other successful interventions, one day someone else might borrow from yours. Your evaluation provides evidence of what works and what doesn't work, both equally important learning opportunities. Additionally, you will need evidence of your project outcomes if you apply for your next NSF grant in the future. When you go back to NSF in a few years to request funding for a new project, you'll have to begin your proposal with a section called Results from Prior NSF Support. This subsection has to include evidence of specific outcomes and results, including metrics to demonstrate the impact of the project activities. Again, these come from your evaluation. It's important to consider at the start of your project what kinds of evidence you might want to have at the end of your project. Let's look at some examples. Here are 3 sets of statements that could show up in a result of prior support section in a future proposal that Jen submits. Take your time to read the examples carefully, then answer the poll that show which example would be most compelling to reviewers as evidence of outcomes. So I'll give you guys about 90 seconds to allow you to do this. All right, so let's take a look at each of these examples more closely. Example A only said what they were funded to do. Celeste Carter, the ATE program lead, said this is all too common in ATE proposals. People just cut and paste from their prior proposal. This is not compelling evidence of outcomes. Example B only reported on activities. It includes a lot of numbers like 150 students enrolled, 300 students benefited, 400 potential students, but these are just counts of what happened. This isn't actually any evidence of what happened to the students as a result of these activities. Example C answers the question of so what? So what happened to those students after they participated? Their pass rate increased. They got jobs. It includes evidence of what changes were brought about because of the project. And this is what you'd want to aim for. Now, take some time to think about your own proposal. Imagine your proposal is successful and you've been funded by the NSF ATE program. Imagine you're in the last year of your ATE grant. What is one thing that you want to be able to say about the success of your project? Take a minute to think about what that one thing would be and share it in the chat box. Met my goals. That is important. Increased engineering graduates. Yes. Right. Number of student jobs placement. Number of students who completed their certificate. The responses are rolling in. Again, all objectives were met. The short and the long-term impact. That would be nice. Collaboration. Increased job placement. Thank you. Bessie. Jamie said students were better prepared for the industry and became employed, got better employment. Ferris said benefited the students. Alana said substantiated short and long-term impact for students. Great. These are all great outcomes that one would love to say about the project at the end. At the need. Thank you. If you want to know more about what goes into that results from prior support section, see our checklist on this topic. It includes NSF requirements plus our suggestions getting the most out of this section of a proposal. Even if you're just thinking about submitting your first NSF proposal, it's not too early to think about how you want to be able to talk about your accomplishments when this project with this project in the future. So I'm going to hand it over to Samantha for a quick question break.
Thank you, Brianna. I have not seen any questions come in yet, but just a reminder that you can put them in the chat at any time and we'll go ahead and mark them. We do have a couple more question breaks coming up as well. So we'll maybe just give it a moment here in case anybody has a question on what we've already covered, and then we'll move on. Unless you want to talk more about superpowers. No, just me. Okay, Brianna, I think we're okay to move on.
All right, thank you.
Oh,
I'm
I'm
good.
sorry. One moment.
Oh,
Um, okay, so we did just have a question. Would satisfaction of our partnerships with our students be an end goal? So I think just clarification on whether that's something that could be an end goal.
Yeah, so satisfaction is an interesting one, right? Because many times someone's satisfaction with someone is with a program or an event or a academic program, right? Is seen as kind of a short-term outcome. Were you happy with this thing? But you're talking about, I'm assuming, employment partners, right? Industry partners who are really hiring students. And so making sure that they are satisfied with the knowledge and skills and training that students are getting out of your program is a really important indicator of meeting that employer needs in your area. So I think that satisfaction would be a really great indicator among a few others to really talk about how you met that employer's needs.
Okay, thank you. And we do have another. If our prior project was in a different discipline, how detailed should our prior NSF support narrative be?
That is a great question. I also want to encourage you to repeat this question to your mentor or to Pam as well. But my understanding is that really the prior NSF support results that you show in that section should be from PIs or co-PIs that are closely related to the proposal you are submitting. So if you feel like that discipline is so different that it may not be something that you need to list in there. But I think our point in bringing up that prior NSF support section is really to be thinking now about what kind of meaningful evidence you want to say to demonstrate to those reviewers that you have a proven track record of carrying out what you said you were going to do and that you made the changes in the world that you intended to make because of that project.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think we are all set.
Wonderful. All right. Well, like Samantha said, we do have a few more question answer sessions. So make sure to put those questions in there. But I know a question that a lot of people have is how much is evaluation going to cost? I know many of you are working on, budgets and estimation, all of that. So let's talk about this. So here is the excerpt from the ATE program solicitation about the evaluation requirement. And it states that the evaluation budget must match the scope of the proposed evaluative activities. And that is certainly important, but it's not very satisfying for people who just want a number to put in their budget that they can work with. So the general rule of thumb is that 10% of a project's cost should be allocated for evaluation. Now, this is the rule of thumb for evaluation in any context, not just NSF or not just ATE. So that's a good place to start. And then you can go up or down from there, depending on what level of evaluation is really needed for your project. A variety of factors can really influence an evaluation budget. So, some examples of those factors include things like the type of data that will be collected. So, qualitative data tends to be more time intensive when it comes to data collection, cleaning, and analysis. Therefore, evaluations that heavily rely on that qualitative data, they might be more expensive. Whether the data has been collected or whether it will be new. So, existing data may be less time consuming for an evaluation team compared to when they need to gather new data, making that new data more expensive. Different evaluators, they interact with projects differently, right? So if you're looking for an evaluator who will be highly responsive to changes in your activities, timelines, or your data needs, that may be more costly than a rigid, responsive evaluation. Then you could talk about the level of engagement from your evaluator. So, an evaluator who is more involved with meetings or decision making, they might be more costly. Some elements of a project's evaluation can be supported by internal project staff, and this can help reduce the burden on your external evaluators. So, without this additional support, the evaluation budget may be more costly. Time travel also has time travel. And now I'm like thinking about superpowers, right? Okay. Travel time, the time it takes an evaluator to travel to your site or the distance might also affect your evaluation budget. So you might want to consider how far your evaluator will have to travel for meetings or site visits. Longer travel times will lead to a higher evaluation budget. So we want to share these not as a formula to write an evaluation budget, but as some guideposts to understand how that 10% rule might be affected by the type of evaluation you're looking for. So it's always best to have an open conversation with your evaluator about your needs and their needs. At the end of the day, if evaluation is going to bring value to your project, you have to fund it adequately. So let's look what this means in practice. So remember our friend Jen. So let's say that she is asking for the maximum amount for projects funded through ATE's Track 1 small scale projects. So her total project budget would be $475,000. So most academic institutions apply an indirect cost, sometimes called facilities and administrations rate. So all institutions' rates are really different. But when Jen calculates hers, her institutional rate comes to $95,000, leaving $380,000 of the budget for direct operating funds. So, as a reminder, the 10% rule of thumb for evaluators is calculated based on this direct operating budget. So if Jen dedicates 10% of her direct budget to evaluation, that would mean that there would be $38,000 over the lifespan of the grant, or $12,666 per year. So these funds would go towards an evaluator's time, as well as their travel expenses and overhead costs. There might be some other miscellaneous expenses, but these are really the main ones that that budget is covering. So, an evaluation budget should reflect what's needed for a given project. So, again, this is just a really rough outline. So, Jen is on her way to understanding what evaluation is and how much it'll cost. And we're going to tackle next her questions about who can evaluate her project. But I know that there are frequently questions about an evaluation budget. So we have placed a short question break here just to make sure that we have all of your questions about evaluation budgets answered before we move on.
Okay. There's no answers there currently, but we can give it a minute again, see if anything pops up.
Often I hear that grant seekers like the budget feels like the most gray space, the most nebulous space. And I will say evaluators have these conversations all the time, right? And so, really, just when you find an evaluator or look for them, um, go ahead and ask what that really is going to look like. Because it really is going to depend on what kind of evaluation you're looking for, what kind of data you're looking to get.
Okay, great. I think you must have nailed it on that explanation. I think we're okay to move on.
All right. I think to Brianna, right?
Yep. Thank you. So I'm sure we're wondering who can do the evaluation. Jen has a lot of smart people on her team, so she's wondering if they can just do it internally. And the short answer to that question is no. Because the ATE program specifically states that the evaluator must be independent of the project. The first question we need to answer is, what counts as independent? According to the ATE program solicitation, an evaluator can be employed by the project's home institution as long as they're in a separate unit with a different reporting line than the project's home unit. Think a different academic department or the institutional research office. For larger institutions that might have the evaluation capacity in other departments, this might work just fine. But for smaller institutions, it can be practically impossible. NSF asks for the evaluators to be independent in order to provide a sense of objectivity and validity to the findings. A good gut check is to ask, can this person evaluate my project objectively? Is there any reason they might feel pressure to influence the results? If you're unsure, it's best to go with someone outside your institution. An external evaluator, someone from outside your institution and project, offers the highest level of independence. They can speak honestly without worrying about potential consequences from their administrators. It can feel difficult to find an evaluator that's right for your project. Small-scale ATE projects can be particularly tricky. When looking for an evaluator, it's important to know that there's no specific degree or certification required to call yourself an evaluator. Many different types of companies and organizations do project evaluations. Some are independent evaluation consultants, while others are large evaluation firms, sometimes based at universities or large research organizations. Here are some things you want to look for when searching for an evaluator. You want to be careful to look for someone who has experience as an evaluator, someone who has strong research skills, someone who's a good communicator and who will be responsive to your situation. It can also be helpful for someone to have an understanding of NSF or two-year colleges. For new to ATE projects, it can be particularly helpful to have an evaluator that has prior experience evaluating ATE projects. It's not always easy to find someone with the perfect mix of credentials. So now let's help Jen select an evaluator for her project. As the poll launches for this question, take a moment to review the credentials of these 3 evaluators. Then use the poll that should appear on the right side of your screen to recommend which evaluator Jen should approach for her project. There's no right answer. We just want to see what stands out to you when choosing an evaluator and what you value as part of the ATE community. If you have any reservations about your suggestion or additional questions that you would ask, use the chat to explain any of your concerns. So far, it's a lot of evaluator B, evaluator C is coming in. All right. A couple more seconds to respond. Okay. All right. So let's start taking a look at each of these evaluators. Sometimes it may be difficult to tell if an evaluator is a good fit from their resume alone. Some follow-up questions definitely may be needed. Let me see, I didn't see. Oh. Yeah, I see somebody in the chat said they would want to ask about the time / evaluator B will be available. They have a lot of projects with 25. All right, so let's take a look at evaluator A. So evaluator A seems to have good knowledge of two-year colleges, technical education, and student services. So personally, I would want to know more about their experience as an external evaluator of grant-funded projects. Accreditation has a lot in common with project evaluation, but it's not quite the same thing. For evaluator B, they look like they have great credentials when it comes to evaluation, but I would want to know how much time they would really have to work on this project, just like Alana said in the chat, given they are working on 25 other evaluations, and I would suspect that they have a team working with them. So I would want to know actually who will be working on the project and what their credentials are. They say they have prior experience with NSF funded projects. I would also want to ask them if they have experience with ATE in particular. And evaluator C seems to certainly know two-year colleges and NSF, but it's not clear if they have any expertise when it comes to research methods and running evaluations. So I would ask about those things. And let's just see one real quick. And so based off of you guys' responses, a lot of you guys went for evaluator B. I just want to note that it's really rare to find a perfect evaluator based on the resume alone. And so again, it's always good to follow up with questions and ask for additional information. To help with this, we've pulled together a list of questions you might want to ask an evaluator when determining which is the right fit for you. An evaluator should fit your project and your team in multiple ways. Not only their skills and evaluation, but also their working style and how they approach the evaluation. The more you feel like you connect with your evaluator, the better potential for evaluation. So now Jen has a better idea of who she might be looking for, but where does she look? With that, I'm going to hand it back over to Lissa.
Thanks, Brianna. So, where do you find an evaluator? Well, Evaluate has done actually some research around this, and most AT projects actually find their evaluator through word of mouth. So, make sure that you're asking your colleagues and other ATE PIs if they have an evaluator that they've enjoyed working with before. But I also know that this answer is not helpful for everyone. The first step to finding an evaluator is actually to know your institutional procurement policies. So, every institution has their own rules on how and when you can work with an external contractor, including evaluators. I wish I could give you a straightforward answer of what this looks like at your institution, but it really is so different in each state and sometimes even within each institution. So, we really do recommend that one of your first conversations is with someone in your procurement or contracts office. They should be able to tell you the specifics of your institution. But here there really are two basic paths. So, in the first path, your institution will allow you to work with an evaluator in the pre award stage, meaning right now while you're developing your proposal. And this can be really great way to connect with your evaluator, get their insights and feedback on not only the evaluation plan, but also your project goals and objectives. Evaluators spend a lot of time thinking about what constitutes meaningful outcomes and how to measure them. So, in this situation, many evaluators will conduct this work upfront without payment. So, they work with the agreement that they will be hired as the evaluator if you receive the grant. Make sure to talk with your evaluator at this point about how they handle these situations and what kind of boundaries they might place around their time and efforts in the pre award stage. In the second path, your institution might say that you need to wait until your project is funded in order to work with an evaluator or even in order to find an evaluator. So, this means that you will not be able to have an external evaluator write your evaluation plan for your proposal. You or someone on your project team will need to write it. While this may seem really overwhelming, know that a lot of ATE projects are actually in a similar boat and that Evaluate has a lot of resources that can support you. So, first, Evaluate has developed a resource that looks at navigating the evaluator procurement process. So, we hope that this guide can give you an overview of what this process could look like and some directions on what to ask your institutional procurement office. Second, Evaluate has a checklist for what content should be used in your evaluation plan for your ATE proposal. So this is exactly the information that we're going to dive into during our next webinar on March 19th. I'm providing this checklist here in case you're ready to get started, but know that we'll talk through every bullet on this checklist in March. So once you know when and how you can contact an evaluator, there are a few places you might look for qualified evaluators. So the American Evaluation Association hosts a national directory of evaluators. You can search this directory by areas of expertise or location. For AT projects, we suggest using terms such as STEM, education, community college, or even NSF. There are also local affiliates of the American Evaluation Association. These regional groups sometimes have their own directory, which may actually list people who are not included in the national directory. So while the evaluator doesn't have to be local to your area, sometimes it can cut down on the travel cost in an evaluation budget or increase their awareness of local needs. Expanding the Bench is another organization that hosts a searchable database of evaluators. So, similar to the AEA database, we would recommend AT projects use search terms like STEM, education, community college, and NSF. ATE Central hosts a map of evaluators who are currently evaluating ATE projects. So in these evaluator profiles, it'll list information such as the company name, contact information, but also the ATE projects and disciplines that they have evaluated in the past. So we're really excited to announce 2 new services through Evaluate to make it easier for you to connect with an evaluator that's right for your project. So the first is the ATE Evaluator Directory. So this is going to be a collection of evaluators who have either worked with ATE projects in the past or who are interested in working with them in the future. Evaluators will each have a profile that highlights their qualifications, their working styles, and allows them to showcase some work examples. We know that the fit of an evaluator is a combination of their qualifications as well as their working styles. So these profiles, we really try and highlight all of that, as well as some personal aspects of the evaluators. So evaluators are actually currently in the process of creating and refining these profiles right now. So keep an eye out for the full launch of the ATE Evaluator Directory in the next month. So if your institution requires you to put out a bid for an evaluator, we hope that you consider posting your request for proposal on Evaluate's new ATE Evaluation RFP repository. So this service is a central location for ATE grant seekers to share their RFPs and for evaluators interested in working with ATE projects to look for those RFPs. So evaluators have signed up for notifications when new RFPs are posted to the site. And this really has the potential to get your RFPs in front of a wide pool of qualified evaluators. So this is up and running. So if you know that you need to go up to bid, if you have an RFP that you'd like to post, you can do that now or always reach out to us for more information about this. So when you get to the stage when you're ready to find and select an evaluator for your project, take a look at Evaluate's guide to finding and selecting an evaluator. So this is a really great summary of all of the information that we've just talked to you about today and some more. So our friend Jen is feeling pretty good about evaluation now, and we hope that you are too. So we have one more question break before we close out our webinar today. Please ask any and all questions you have about evaluation. Samantha, take it away.
Thank you, Lissa. Okay, so we'll give people a moment to enter any questions into the chat. While they work on that, I actually do have kind of our greatest hits, our most asked questions in regards to this. So, um, Brianna, can you tell me what is the difference between assessment and evaluation?
I feel like that was, you threw it on me.
Or Lissa. I mean, it's a pretty exciting question.
No. Well, evaluation is more so looking at programs and projects, whereas assessment doesn't typically look at that. Assessment is looking at a specific construct or something particularly that they're assessing. So projects are looking at evaluation is typically looking at programs. How do you feel about that? Lisa, did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I completely agree. I would also add in there that very often when we're talking about assessments, we are referencing like student assessment. So we're really assessing learning, knowledge gains, or skills. And very often, particularly in ATE projects, those types of student assessments are really useful within the evaluation, but they're almost like one part of the evaluation within all those other elements that Brianna was talking about when it comes to actually evaluating the project as a whole.
Great, thank you. Let's talk about logic models. Um, why should someone consider using a logic model and who makes it?
Go ahead and start off with that one. So a lot of times the logic model is a collaborative activity. So that could be done with the evaluators and the project teams. And it helps to really ensure that your project activities and your intended outcomes are all aligned. And so you can see it visually, work through it together. So the activities are meaningful and we're getting towards the intended outcomes, so long-term and short-term outcomes for the project. So I'm not sure if there's anything else that Lisa wants to add, but that is my view, on logic models.
Yeah, I would add there are two really, I think, important strengths of logic models when developing a grant proposal, like for a program like ATE. So the first is just working with your project team and your evaluation team. Logic models are such great tools for communication to get everyone on the same page. Sometimes, as an evaluator, I've gone into a situation and there's a PI, co-PIs, some project staff, and I realize that they all have different assumptions about how the how the program is going to work, right? So really writing down what those logical connections are between the activities that you're doing and the outcomes that you want to see, it really just making the logic model in that collaborative process, like Brianna said, is such a great tool to get everyone on the same page. And then another way it can be a really strong opportunity for communicating the purpose and outcomes of your project is to take that logic model and put it in your project description, right? In your proposal. So we'll talk about this more in March. I know you only have 15 pages. I know that seems like a really limited amount of space, but a logic model or a theory of change, whichever direction you want to go, something that really visualizes those logical connections between what you're going to do and what you want to change because of those actions is going to really help reviewers not only remember your project, but also really understand all the intricate connections between your proposal.
And Lisa, great question in the chat from Gabriel. Is a logic model like focused brainstorming?
I love that. I've never
Me
thought about
too.
it quite like that, but in many ways, if you're taking that collaborative development approach, it really is focused brainstorming. Um, so I'll say we actually have an entire hour-long webinar on logic models. So I'm sure I can find that link really fast if you want to look more into that. We'll talk about it a little bit more in March with given and examples. And then last year, the Evaluate team also held logic model clinics in which we would sit down with you one-on-one and look at your project logic model and really talk through it. And I believe we're going to be offering the same opportunities this year at High Tech. So that was a really valuable opportunity.
Great, thank you. Okay, and Brianna, um, just to clarify, did you say that it's not allowable to have the external evaluator help develop the evaluation section?
Just to clarify, there are different policies based off of your institution. So depending on what your policies are at your institution, if you're able to identify an evaluator in the development or the proposal stage, then they would be, of course, able to help develop that evaluation section. However, in the case that your institution doesn't allow you to pick an evaluator before your proposal, that may be something that you want to create with your project team. And once you're able to get an evaluator, go back and like discuss.
Yeah, this piece is really confusing. And so we will say we hope to see you at the next evaluation webinar. The first question we are going to ask you is going to be about this. So your homework between now and March 19th is to make sure you reach out to someone in your institutional procurement office, sometimes called contracts, grants. If you don't know what office it is, make sure you can reach out to your VP. Someone will be able to tell you who the right person. It's different at every institution, but really ask about their policies on procurement and whether or not you are allowed to name an evaluator in your proposal, which will allow you to work with that evaluator pre-award, or whether you have to wait until you're funded.
Okay, great. And our last question is, who is paying for the evaluator before the project is funded?
That's a good question. A lot of times evaluators will, if being said that you're allowed to have an evaluator in the pre-award phase, or are willing to work with the project team to develop the whole proposal for you with you, with an understanding that if you are awarded, they will be able to be the evaluator on the project. So typically it's just something that is done pre-funding.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, so I hope that you'll take the chance to connect with us. Following us on LinkedIn is a great way to stay current on any new resources, upcoming events, helpful blogs you might be interested in, and more fun stuff. It would also be great to bookmark our website. It will be really helpful. Well, we hope it will be very helpful for you on this journey. So you can go ahead and connect with us however you'd like. Remember to mark your calendars for our second webinar on evaluation specifically for the Mentor Connect cohort. That is on March 19th at 3 p.m. And this webinar will be discussing detailed strategies and insights to develop evaluation plans for NSF ATE proposals. As we close today, we hope that you'll take a couple of minutes to take our feedback survey. I mean, shocker, we love evaluation, but we always like to hear what you think, and we do use that to improve resources and webinars going forward. We're so happy that you were able to join us today, and I hope that we'll see you again in March.
Thank you, everyone. Good luck in your proposal development stage. And if you have any questions about evaluation along the way, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Thank you.